History remembers kings in gold armor, queens in jewel gowns, and royal courts glittering beneath chandeliers. But behind the silk curtains of Britain's palaces lurked a disease so feared, so humiliating, that entire dynasties worked desperately to hide it. It was whispered about in taverns, blamed on foreign enemies, and concealed beneath layers of perfume, wigs, makeup, and ceremony. The disease was syphilis, a plague that crept silently through Europe's nobility and may have touched the very bloodline of Britain's crown. In the 15th and 16th centuries, syphilis exploded across Europe with terrifying speed. Nobody fully understood what caused it. Physicians offered bizarre explanations. Some claimed it was divine punishment for lust. Others believed poisoned air or cursed blood spread the illness. Treatments were often worse than the disease itself. Mercury ointments, toxic vapors, and painful bleeding rituals became common medical practices. Patients were told to endure agony in silence while their bodies slowly deteriorated. For ordinary people, syphilis was devastating enough, but for royalty, it posed a unique threat. Monarchies depended on appearance, stability, and the illusion of divine favor. A diseased king suggested weakness. A barren queen threatened succession. Rumors of infection could destroy alliances, provoke rebellions, or stain a dynasty for generations. So royal households became masters of secrecy. British courts in particular were fertile ground for scandal. Affairs flourished in hidden chambers. Courtiers exchanged lovers like political favors. Mistresses gained influence over state decisions. Physicians were bribed into silence. Royal portraits were carefully painted to hide sores, hair loss, and facial damage. The public saw beauty and power. Behind closed doors, many nobles endured pain, madness, infertility, and slow decay. Historians still debate exactly how deeply syphilis infected Britain's monarchy. Records were deliberately destroyed, altered, or concealed. Royal doctors wrote in coded language. Symptoms were described vaguely as melancholy, skin eruptions, or disturbances of the mind. Yet scattered evidence across centuries paints a disturbing picture. Some of Britain's most powerful royals displayed symptoms eerily consistent with advanced syphilis. The disease itself moved in stages. At first, victims might notice painless sores or mild illness. Then came rashes, fever, and hair loss. Years later, the true horror emerged. Untreated syphilis could rot flesh, deform faces, attack the brain, and drive people into insanity. Victims suffered paranoia, hallucinations, memory loss, and violent mood swings. In royal families already burdened by inbreeding and political pressure, such symptoms could reshape history itself. But perhaps the most chilling aspect was how syphilis thrived in silence. Royal reputations mattered more than truth. Servants disappeared after learning too much. Court physicians risked execution for exposing secrets. Entire scandals vanished into locked archives. Tonight, we enter that hidden world, a Britain where crowns concealed disease, where royal bloodlines carried deadly secrets, and where power itself may have been infected. These are the whispers hidden beneath centuries of ceremony. This is the rot behind the crown. No royal court in British history became more infamous for lust, scandal, and whispered sickness than the Tudor court. Beneath the grandeur of banquets and tournaments, the palace of King Henry VIII overflowed with affairs, rivalries, and dangerous secrets. It was a world where beauty could become power overnight, and where disease spread just as quickly as gossip. The Tudor era arrived during the height of Europe's syphilis panic. By the early 1500s, the disease had already earned terrifying names across the continent. The English called it the French disease. The French blamed Naples. Russians blamed Poland. Everyone treated syphilis like a foreign curse brought by outsiders, refusing to admit it existed within their own society. Yet nowhere was it more dangerous than among Europe's elite. At the center of Britain's royal court stood Henry VIII himself, one of history's most controversial monarchs. Towering, charismatic, and obsessed with legacy, Henry transformed England politically and religiously, but rumors surrounding his health have haunted historians for centuries. Some researchers believe Henry may have suffered from syphilis, though direct proof remains elusive. The theory persists for unsettling reasons. Henry's behavior changed dramatically over time. In his youth, he was athletic, intelligent, and energetic. Later, he became paranoid, impulsive, cruel, and increasingly unstable. He experienced chronic leg ulcers, severe mood swings, headaches, and violent rage. His wives suffered repeated miscarriages and stillbirths, a tragedy some historians connect to untreated venereal disease. Royal physicians never openly documented syphilis in Henry's records. But that means little. Admitting the king carried such a disease would have been politically catastrophic. Instead, medical reports use vague language and coded descriptions. Court doctors often concealed diagnoses to protect themselves and the monarchy. Henry's court itself was notorious for sexual intrigue. Noblemen maintained mistresses openly. Courtiers competed for romantic access to power. And Bullen's rise and execution revealed how quickly desire could turn deadly inside the palace walls. In such an environment, disease spread easily. Meanwhile, treatments for syphilis remained horrifying. Mercury was commonly rubbed into skin or inhaled as vapor. Doctors believed excessive sweating could purge illness from the body. Victims lost teeth, developed tremors, and suffered poisoning from the cure itself. One grim phrase became common during the period: a night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Beyond Henry, whispers surrounded other Tudor figures as well. Some nobles displayed facial lesions hidden beneath cosmetics. Others suddenly withdrew from court life after mysterious illnesses. Secretive medical chambers operated within royal residences where trusted physicians treated sensitive conditions away from public eyes. The obsession with heirs intensified the fear. A diseased bloodline threatened the entire kingdom. Miscarriages, infertility, and infant deaths were often interpreted as divine punishment or curses. Yet behind those fears may have been untreated infections spreading silently through aristocratic families. Whether Henry VIII truly suffered from syphilis may never be conclusively proven, but one truth is undeniable. The Tudor court created perfect conditions for secrecy, infection, and paranoia. Beneath the dazzling image of England's golden age stood a royal household terrified of weakness and haunted by diseases nobody dared speak aloud. In Britain's royal courts, physicians served two masters. One was medicine. The other was the crown itself. Their duty was not merely to heal monarchs, but to protect royal reputations at all costs. And when syphilis entered palace walls, secrecy became more important than truth. Royal medicine in the Tudor and Stuart eras was primitive, dangerous, and deeply political. Doctors were expected to preserve the illusion of divine monarchy. A king was meant to appear chosen by God, physically strong and mentally sound. Admitting that a monarch carried a sexually transmitted disease threatened not only personal dignity, but the stability of the kingdom itself. As a result, royal physicians mastered the art of coded language. They rarely wrote syphilis in official documents. Instead, illnesses were disguised behind vague phrases such as corruption of the blood, fevered eruptions, or distemper of the humors. Symptoms that modern medicine associates with advanced syphilis, memory loss, aggression, skin lesions, paralysis, were described in ways that concealed their true nature. Court doctors also face enormous danger. Revealing a monarch's illness could mean imprisonment, exile, or execution. Royal secrets were guarded with terrifying intensity. Physicians sometimes burned records after a ruler's death. Others altered notes to protect the dynasty's legacy. Historians today often encounter frustrating gaps where evidence should exist. The fear surrounding syphilis was especially intense because the disease attacked both body and mind. Early symptoms might remain hidden beneath clothing or cosmetics, but advanced cases became impossible to ignore. Victims could lose hair, develop ulcers, suffer facial deformities, or descend into madness. For a royal court built entirely upon image and authority, such deterioration was catastrophic. Cosmetics became tools of deception. Heavy white makeup concealed scars and sores. Elaborate wigs hid hair loss. Perfumes masked the smell of infected wounds. Portrait painters were instructed to idealize royal appearances, smoothing damaged skin and erasing signs of illness entirely. Many famous royal portraits are likely visualized, crafted to preserve political stability. Mercury treatments worsened the nightmare. Doctors believed mercury could purge syphilis from the body. Patients were locked in heated rooms, rubbed with toxic ointments, or forced to inhale mercury vapors. The treatment caused drooling, tooth loss, trembling, hallucinations, and neurological damage. Ironically, Mercury poisoning often resembled the very symptoms of late-stage syphilis, making diagnosis even more confusing. Inside royal households, servants learned quickly to remain silent. Chambers containing sick nobles were isolated from public view. Trusted attendants carried medicines discreetly through hidden corridors. Rumors still escaped, however. London streets buzzed with gossip about diseased aristocrats and cursed bloodlines. Satirical pamphlets mocked the hypocrisy of noble morality, while secretly hinting at infections among the elite. The royal family's desperation to hide illness created a culture of paranoia. Anyone could become a threat: physicians, servants, lovers, even family members. Secrets became currency in court politics. Accusations of sexual misconduct could destroy reputations overnight, and so the British monarchy constructed a carefully polished illusion for the outside world. Crowns glittered, ceremonies dazzled, portraits displayed perfection. Yet behind locked palace doors, doctors struggled desperately against diseases they barely understood, while hiding truths that could shake the throne itself. As syphilis advanced through the human body, its final stage became the most terrifying of all. The disease could invade the brain itself, slowly unraveling the mind. Victims experienced paranoia, hallucinations, violent mood swings, memory loss, and irrational behavior. In royal courts where a monarch's mental stability determined the fate of entire nations, such symptoms could become catastrophic. British history contains several rulers whose strange behavior has fueled centuries of speculation. While modern historians debate exact diagnoses, many researchers believe syphilis may have contributed to the instability seen within certain royal bloodlines. One of the most famous examples was King George III. To the public, he became known as the Mad King. During episodes of mental collapse, George reportedly talked endlessly for hours, suffered confusion, and displayed bizarre behavior that terrified those around him. Some historians attribute his condition to a rare genetic disorder called porphyria. Others argue that symptoms of neurosyphilis cannot be completely ruled out. Inside the palace, fear spread rapidly whenever the king's mind began to deteriorate. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors. Political rivals watched carefully. Britain's enemies observed from abroad. A monarch losing control of reality threatened the stability of the entire empire. Royal households became prisons of secrecy during these periods. Physicians monitored kings constantly, searching desperately for treatments. Some patients were restrained physically during violent episodes. Others were isolated from public appearances to prevent rumors from spreading. Newspapers received strict warnings about what they could publish regarding the crown's health. The fear of hereditary weakness only deepened the panic. European royal families frequently married within narrow aristocratic circles to preserve alliances and bloodlines. As diseases and genetic conditions accumulated across generations, mental instability became increasingly visible among Europe's nobility. In Britain, public confidence depended heavily on the image of royal strength. Yet behind ceremonial smiles, many royals suffered intense emotional strain. Constant pressure, arranged marriages, affairs, miscarriages, and political betrayal created an environment where illness could flourish unnoticed or deliberately ignored. By the 18th and 19th centuries, London society openly associated immoral behavior with madness and venereal disease. Satirical artists filled newspapers with grotesque illustrations mocking diseased aristocrats. Rumors spread about nobles hiding scars beneath wigs and cosmetics, while secretly descending into insanity. Some historians believe that royal doctors intentionally misdiagnosed syphilis-related symptoms to avoid scandal. Nervous exhaustion, melancholia, and brain fever became convenient labels that conceal far more disturbing possibilities. The monarchy could survive many things, but public knowledge of sexual disease and mental collapse among rulers risked destroying the sacred image of the crown. The psychological horror of syphilis made it uniquely terrifying. Victims were often fully aware that their minds were slipping away. Hallucinations blurred reality. Paranoia destroyed trust. Rage erupted unpredictably. Family members watched helplessly as loved ones transformed into strangers. For Britain's monarchy, madness carried political consequences as deadly as war itself. Advisors manipulated weakened rulers. Regents seized power. Succession crises emerged. Entire governments trembled whenever whispers of royal instability escaped palace walls. And through it all, the official image remained polished and dignified. Portraits showed calm authority. Public ceremonies projected confidence. But hidden beneath velvet robes and jeweled crowns was an unbearable fear that the rot consuming the body might also consume the mind. Behind Britain's royal scandal stood another hidden force that helped disease spread through aristocratic society: the culture of royal mistresses. For centuries, extramarital affairs were not merely tolerated within royal courts. They were often expected. Kings maintained official mistresses with shocking openness. Noble women competed for royal attention because intimacy with a monarch could bring wealth, influence, land, and political power. Entire factions formed around powerful lovers inside the palace. In this dangerous environment, desire and ambition became inseparable. But alongside luxury and influence came invisible risks. By the 17th century, Britain's royal court had developed a reputation for excess. Lavish parties, secret fairs, gambling, and sexual intrigue flourished beneath palace chandeliers. King Charles II became especially notorious for his countless mistresses. Nicknamed the Merry Monarch, Charles fathered numerous illegitimate children and surrounded himself with a court famous for indulgence. In an age before modern medicine, sexually transmitted diseases spread rapidly through aristocratic circles. A single infected noble could unknowingly pass illness across multiple households connected through affairs, marriages, and political alliances. Because nobles traveled frequently between European courts, disease moved easily across borders as well. Yet discussing such illnesses publicly remained taboo. Aristocrats feared social ruin more than infection itself. Noble women suffering symptoms often vanished temporarily from court life under vague explanations of poor health. Men concealed sores and skin damage beneath elaborate clothing and cosmetics. Royal mistresses occupied an especially dangerous position. They enjoyed immense privilege but lived under constant scrutiny. Aging, illness, or scandal could destroy them overnight. Some women reportedly relied on perfumes and makeup to hide visible symptoms of disease while continuing appearances at court. The obsession with beauty intensified the horror. White lead makeup, commonly used by aristocratic women, damaged the skin severely over time. Wigs concealed hair loss caused by illness or mercury treatments. Behind the glamorous appearance of royal courts lurked bodies, deteriorating beneath layers of powder and perfume. For kings, sexual behavior also carried political consequences. Affairs could influence diplomacy, inheritance, and succession. Powerful mistresses sometimes shaped national policy through their influence over monarchs. If disease weakened a ruler physically or mentally, those closest to him gained dangerous levels of control. Rumors surrounding syphilis became weapons in court politics. Rivals accused each other of infection to destroy reputations. Pamphlets mocked diseased nobles in coded language. Satirists portrayed aristocrats as morally corrupt and physically decaying beneath their luxurious appearances. The public became fascinated by these hidden scandals. London taverns buzzed with stories about secret pregnancies, mysterious illnesses, and royal cover-ups. Ordinary citizens viewed aristocratic disease almost as divine punishment for excess and immorality. But the true tragedy often remained hidden. Many women trapped within royal courts had little real freedom. Marriages were political transactions. Young noble women were pushed toward powerful men for family advantage. Once illness entered their lives, silence became survival. The glittering world of Britain's royal mistresses looked glamorous from afar. Yet beneath the jewels and silk existed fear, manipulation, and physical decay. Every romantic encounter carried hidden danger. Every whispered scandal threatened destruction. And through generations of secrecy, disease continued spreading silently through the veins of the empire's elite. For Britain's monarchy, no fear was greater than the fear of a broken bloodline. Kings could survive scandal. Queens could endure rumors. But if illness threatened royal heirs, the stability of the entire kingdom stood at risk. Syphilis was especially terrifying because it did not stop with the infected. Untreated mothers could pass the disease to unborn children, resulting in miscarriages, stillbirths, deformities, blindness, neurological damage, or early death. In royal families obsessed with succession, these tragedies became sources of paranoia and desperation. Across centuries of British history, royal households suffered shocking numbers of infant deaths and failed pregnancies. At the time, physicians blamed curses, weak constitutions, divine punishment, or bad humors. But modern historians have questioned whether venereal disease may have contributed to some of these devastating outcomes. The Tudor dynasty offers one of the most haunting examples. Henry VIII's desperate obsession with producing a healthy male heir shaped England's future forever. Several pregnancies involving his wives ended in miscarriage or infant death. Historians continue debating the exact medical explanation, but some researchers suspect an undiagnosed disease within the royal bloodline may have played a role. For queens, the pressure was unbearable. A woman's worth at court often depended entirely on her ability to produce healthy children. Repeated pregnancy failures could lead to humiliation, abandonment, or even execution. And Boleyn's downfall demonstrated how quickly royal favor could turn deadly when succession became uncertain. Meanwhile, children born with visible abnormalities or illnesses were often hidden from public view. Royal courts carefully controlled information about heirs to preserve confidence in the monarchy. Weak or sickly children threatened political alliances and invited foreign opportunists to challenge succession claims. Some historians believe certain neurological and physical disorders within European royal families may have been worsened by generations of intermarriage combined with untreated infections. Symptoms of congenital syphilis included facial deformities, bone abnormalities, hearing loss, and developmental issues, conditions that royal physicians often concealed or misunderstood. Fear of tainted bloodlines spread beyond Britain as European monarchies became deeply interconnected through marriage alliances. A diseased prince or princess could carry infection into another royal house, spreading both illness and scandal across the continent. Inside palace nurseries, anxiety became constant. Wet nurses, physicians, and attendants monitored royal infants obsessively for signs of weakness. Every fever sparked panic. Every miscarriage fueled whispers. Astrologers, priests, and doctors offer conflicting explanations, while desperate monarchs search for solutions. Some royal women endured repeated pregnancies despite severe physical suffering, because producing heirs was considered their sacred duty. Their pain remained hidden behind ceremonial appearances and carefully crafted portraits. History celebrated royal births with grand celebrations while quietly burying the countless tragedies that preceded them. The monarchy's obsession with blood purity created a dangerous illusion. Royal families believed noble blood made them superior, chosen by God to rule. Yet behind palace walls, disease and genetic weakness revealed the fragility of that belief. The crown depended upon inheritance. But what happened when inheritance itself carried hidden rot? As Britain's monarchy fought desperately to preserve its future, generations of royal children became unwilling participants in a silent battle against illness, secrecy, and fear. And in some cases, the true cause of that battle may have been buried forever within unmarked graves and forgotten records. Long before modern public relations existed, Britain's monarchy already understood the power of image. Royalty did not survive through military strength alone. Crowns endured because people believed in them. Kings and queens had to appear majestic, healthy, and almost divine. But when disease entered the palace, maintaining that illusion became a desperate struggle. Syphilis threatened more than physical health. It threatened the very mythology of monarchy. As the disease advanced, its symptoms became horrifyingly visible. Victims developed skin eruptions, facial sores, swollen joints, hair loss, and disfigurement. In later stages, the nose could collapse, teeth could fall out, and flesh itself seemed to decay. For ordinary people, these symptoms brought social shame. For royalty, they could trigger political catastrophe. So the palace created an image machine designed to conceal weakness at all costs. Royal portraits became powerful propaganda tools. Court painters were instructed to flatter monarchs and erase imperfections. Wrinkles disappeared beneath smooth brushstrokes. Diseased skin became flawless. Frail rulers appeared strong and commanding. Historians today believe many royal portraits concealed obvious symptoms of illness that would have shocked the public if seen openly. Makeup played a major role in the deception. Aristocrats covered scars and blemishes with thick white cosmetics made from lead powder. Ironically, these beauty products slowly poisoned the skin, causing further deterioration over time. Heavy rouge disguised pale complexions. Wigs concealed hair loss caused by disease, or mercury treatments. Fashion itself evolved partly around concealment. High collars hid neck lesions. Gloves covered damaged hands. Layers of luxurious fabric masked fragile bodies, weakened by infection. Royal appearances were carefully choreographed to reveal only controlled glimpses of health and power. Public ceremonies became performances. Even seriously ill monarchs were sometimes forced into appearances to reassure the nation. Advisors feared that visible weakness could encourage rebellion, panic financial markets, or embolden foreign enemies. The crown's survival depended upon maintaining confidence. Behind the scenes, however, palace life could become terrifyingly tense. Servants whispered about mysterious illnesses. Physicians rushed through hidden corridors carrying medicines and mercury compounds. Noble families quietly arranged private treatments far from public eyes. Some royals reportedly isolated themselves for months during severe outbreaks of illness. The rise of printed newspapers and pamphlets during the 17th and 18th centuries made secrecy even harder. Satirists mocked diseased aristocrats with coded jokes and grotesque illustrations. Political enemies weaponized rumors of illness against rival factions. The public became increasingly fascinated by the hidden lives of the elite. Yet despite the rumors, the monarchy often succeeded in controlling the narrative. Royal archives restricted access to sensitive records. Embarrassing letters vanished mysteriously. Physicians remained bound by loyalty and fear. Even after death, official accounts carefully shaped how monarchs would be remembered. This obsession with image transformed Britain's royalty into something almost theatrical. The public saw crowns, jewels, and ceremony. Hidden beneath that spectacle were bodies suffering from disease, pain, and fear. The contrast was haunting. A king could appear magnificent during a coronation, while privately enduring unbearable treatments behind locked doors. A queen celebrated for beauty might spend hours concealing sores beneath toxic cosmetics. A royal heir presented as strong and healthy could secretly suffer from inherited illness. The monarchy became a stage where perfection was performed while decay remained hidden backstage. And perhaps that is what made the scandal so disturbing. The rot was not only physical, it was institutional. The crown itself depended upon illusion, silence, and denial, even as disease slowly spread to the very bloodlines meant to symbolize strength and permanence. In Britain, royal scandals rarely stayed hidden forever. No matter how fiercely the palace tried to suppress rumors, whispers always escaped into the streets of London. Tavern conversations, underground pamphlets, political cartoons, and gossip networks spread stories faster than the monarchy could silence them. And nothing fascinated the public more than rumors of disease inside the royal court. Syphilis carried a unique horror during earlier centuries because it represented both physical decay and moral corruption. Society viewed the illness not simply as a medical condition, but as evidence of sin, lust, and divine punishment. When ordinary citizens heard rumors that nobles or royals suffer from such diseases, it shattered the image of aristocratic superiority. People became obsessed with hidden weakness among the elite. By the 18th century, London's print culture exploded with satirical attacks against powerful figures. Cartoonists portrayed aristocrats with grotesque faces, collapsing noses, and diseased bodies hidden beneath elegant clothing. Writers used coded language to hint at sexual scandals within noble families. Public fascination with royal immorality became almost a form of entertainment. Coffee houses and taverns served as centers of rumor exchange. Stories spread rapidly about mysterious royal illnesses, hidden pregnancies, and secret medical treatments. Sometimes these rumors were exaggerated or entirely false. But the monarchy's secrecy only fueled public suspicion further. Political rivals exploited disease rumors as weapons. Accusing a royal figure of venereal disease could destroy reputations overnight. Opponents suggested infected rulers were mentally unstable, morally corrupt, or unfit to govern. Foreign enemies watched Britain carefully for signs of weakness inside the monarchy. In some cases, even whispers of illness influenced diplomatic negotiations and succession debates. The public also feared syphilis because treatments remained brutal and unreliable. Mercury cures caused horrifying side effects. Patients drooled uncontrollably, lost teeth, suffered tremors, and sometimes died from poisoning before the disease itself killed them. Stories about these treatments spread fear across every level of society. Religious leaders intensified the panic. Many priests preached that syphilis represented God's punishment for sexual immorality. Sermons warned against temptation, while simultaneously feeding public obsession with scandal. The disease became linked to shame and secrecy so deeply that many sufferers avoided seeking treatment altogether. Within aristocratic society, paranoia flourished. Marriage negotiations sometimes collapsed because of whispered suspicions about family health histories. Noble families investigated potential spouses carefully, fearing hidden disease could contaminate bloodlines and inheritance. Court physicians gained enormous influence because they controlled sensitive medical information that could ruin dynasties. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens viewed royal scandals with a mix of outrage and fascination. Britain's monarchy claimed divine legitimacy and moral authority. Yet rumors suggested many royals indulged in the same excesses condemned publicly. This hypocrisy fueled resentment against the aristocracy, especially during periods of economic hardship and political unrest. Even after death, royal reputations remained battlegrounds. Historians still debate whether certain monarchs truly suffered from syphilis or whether later generations exaggerated rumors for political or sensational purposes. Because records were often destroyed or altered, the truth became buried beneath centuries of speculation. But perhaps the rumors themselves reveal something important. The public desperately wanted to believe that beneath the jewels and ceremony, royalty was just as vulnerable, flawed, and mortal as everyone else. Disease exposed the humanity hidden beneath the crown, and in the dark imagination of Britain's people, the palace became not merely a symbol of power, but a house filled with secrets, corruption, and rot hidden behind velvet curtains. By the 19th century, Britain stood at the center of a vast empire. Industry boomed, cities expanded, science advanced rapidly. Yet despite this image of progress, syphilis still haunted society, including the upper classes and royal circles. The difference now was that medicine slowly began uncovering the truth. For centuries, physicians misunderstood disease almost entirely. Illness was blamed on bad air, curses, imbalance of bodily fluids, or divine punishment. But during the Victorian era, scientific discoveries transformed medicine forever. Doctors gradually recognized that syphilis followed identifiable stages and spread through intimate contact. Even so, stigma remained overwhelming. Victorian Britain became deeply obsessed with morality and public respectability. Discussions of sexuality were considered shameful, especially among the elite. As a result, venereal diseases continued spreading quietly beneath society's polished exterior. Hospitals treating syphilis patients often separated them from respectable society. Women accused of prostitution faced especially brutal treatment. Meanwhile, wealthy aristocrats could afford private physicians who protected their identities and treated them discreetly inside luxurious homes. The monarchy adapted carefully to this changing world. Royal households became far more disciplined publicly during the Victorian era compared to the scandal-ridden courts of earlier centuries. Queen Victoria cultivated an image of family values, duty, and moral stability. This transformation helped distance the crown from the excesses associated with previous royal generations. Yet, hidden illness did not disappear overnight. Historians believe many aristocratic families continued concealing venereal diseases well into the late 19th century. Medical confidentiality became increasingly important. Doctors treating nobles understood that exposure could destroy marriages, inheritance claims, and political careers. Then came one of the greatest breakthroughs in medical history. In 1905, scientists finally identified the bacterium responsible for syphilis, Treponema pallidum. For the first time, doctors understood exactly what caused the disease. This discovery transformed diagnosis and treatment dramatically. Soon afterward, new medicines emerged that proved far more effective than the deadly mercury cures of previous centuries. By the mid-20th century, antibiotics like penicillin made syphilis treatable and often curable if caught early. But the damage left by earlier centuries could never fully disappear. Generations of secrecy had shaped royal behavior, public fear, and medical history itself. Countless victims suffered silently because shame prevented open discussion. Families buried scandals to preserve status. Historical records vanished into archives or flames. Even today, uncertainty surrounds many royal illnesses from Britain's past. Some historians reject claims that famous monarchs suffered from syphilis, arguing evidence remains too weak or speculative. Others believe the scale of concealment was so extensive that the full truth may never be known. What remains undeniable is how power and secrecy protected the elite differently from ordinary people. Poor victims face humiliation publicly. Royal victims disappear behind palace walls. And perhaps that is why the story still fascinates modern audiences. The scandal reveals something timeless about institutions built on image and authority. Beneath the appearance of perfection often lies fear. Fear of weakness, fear of exposure, fear of human vulnerability itself. The British monarchy survived wars, rebellions, and political upheaval. But hidden beneath centuries of grandeur was another silent battle entirely. One fought not with armies or crowns, but with secrecy, medicine, and a desperate need to preserve an illusion. The illusion that royalty was somehow untouchable. For centuries, Britain's monarchy projected an image of permanence. Crowns glittered beneath cathedral lights. Royal banners waved over palaces and battlefields. Kings and queens appeared larger than life, symbols of destiny, divine authority, and national pride. But behind that dazzling spectacle existed another reality. A reality of sickness hidden beneath silk robes. A reality of fear buried inside palace walls. A reality where even the most powerful bloodlines in Britain could not escape disease, decay, and mortality. The story of syphilis within royal circles is not simply about one illness. It is about the terrifying lengths institutions will go to preserve power and image. Monarchies depended upon illusion. Subjects needed to believe their rulers were chosen, stable, and strong. Any sign of weakness threatened that carefully constructed myth, so secrets became part of the crown itself. Physicians concealed diagnoses. Painters erased scars. Servants remained silent. Records disappeared. Entire generations learned that survival inside royal courts depended not upon honesty, but discretion, and yet the truth always lingered in whispers. Whispers about kings losing their minds. Whispers about queens suffering unexplained miscarriages. Whispers about diseased nobles hiding behind wigs, cosmetics, and ceremony. History may never fully uncover how deeply syphilis spread through Britain's monarchy. Evidence remains fragmented, debated, and obscured by centuries of secrecy. Some accusations were likely exaggerated by political enemies. Other truths may have been deliberately buried forever. But perhaps the uncertainty itself tells a real story. Royal power was built not only through armies and laws, but through control of narrative. The monarchy survived because it controlled what the public could see, and what remained hidden in darkness. The disease became symbolic of something larger. Behind magnificent palaces stood fragile human beings terrified of exposure. Behind royal bloodlines stood bodies vulnerable to the same suffering as ordinary people. Behind crowns stood mortality itself. That contradiction fascinated the public then, just as it does today. People wanted to believe royalty was extraordinary, yet they were equally drawn to proof that monarchs could fall, weaken, and decay like everyone else. Disease stripped away the illusion of divine perfection and revealed something deeply human underneath. In many ways, the greatest fear inside Britain's royal courts was never death alone. It was humiliation. The fear that the public might see behind performance. The fear that beneath the gold, beneath the velvet, beneath the crown itself, there was rot. And perhaps that is why these stories still endure across centuries of history. Because they remind us that power often hides its deepest wounds behind the brightest symbols. The palaces remain standing. The portraits still hang in grand halls. The crowns still sparkle beneath the lights. But somewhere beneath the polished surface of history, the whispers remain. Whispers of disease. Whispers of secrecy. Whispers of the rot behind the crown. If history's darkest royal secrets fascinate you, subscribe to the Crit Stories and step deeper into the shadows of the past.